This condo is listed at $855,000. I'm just gonna put that out there. Whet your appetite a little bit before we start talking about the new ADU rules that are going into effect in January 2024. The state of California is changing its ADU rules once again. And these are some of the most confusing changes I've seen, but also some of the most exciting. So in this video, we're gonna talk about some of the more important changes and how we expect them to unroll in 2024. For example, you might be able to sell your ADU separately, like a condo, like that. I've been working all year to advocate for these rules in Sacramento and help our representatives understand the importance and power of ADUs in the communities that they're representing. That gives me a really unique perspective to share what I know and what my friends are telling me from Sacramento, but also to share what we don't know and some of the uncertainties that we'll face as these rule changes roll out over 2024. And having said all that, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not your lawyer. I'm a guy who's obsessed with housing, who's gonna keep you up to date as I learn, and hopefully we can build a lot more housing in California thanks to some of these wonderful new rules. All right, we're gonna talk about 4 ADU laws today. We're gonna go through them as quickly as possible, not to waste your time, just get you the important gist. We're gonna start with AB 976 by Assemblymember Ting. When the state first passed statewide ADU rules, it wasn't really specific about this one part. And so local cities and counties that wanted to slow down ADUs said, okay, we'll allow ADUs, but they have to be owner occupied. Or some would say, but the primary house has to be owner occupied. And this has the effect of slowing down ADUs because sometimes homeowners don't want to be tied down to that deed restriction. Other times it hurts financing options because lenders don't want to lend on units that are going to have a deed restriction. That was a slowdown. That put the brakes on a lot of ADUs. So they passed a cleanup bill. The legislators said, hey, cities and counties cannot require owner occupancy. But that was a hard thing to get passed. So a typical compromise is they said, let's put a sunset clause in the bill. So cities and counties cannot require owner occupancy for ADUs until January 2025. This is a great way to compromise because it gives us a few years to collect data and say, hey, look, it's been a few years. We've built a lot of ADUs without owner occupancy requirements. The sky hasn't fallen. In fact, these are exceedingly popular ways for cities to meet their housing requirements. So how about we just remove that sunset clause? This is a screenshot of how this one part of the government code is going to change. And you can see it's a lot of red pen crossing out the sunset provisions that said it would only last until January 2025. So that means that AB 976 sort of indefinitely extends the owner occupancy requirement ban. If you're building an ADU, you should not have to worry about owner occupancy requirements. If you're building a junior ADU, cities and counties still can require owner occupancy deed restrictions. And be careful out there because I've seen cities and counties send the junior ADU paperwork, those deed restrictions, even though people are completing an ADU. And when my clients call them on it and say, hey, I'm pretty sure I'm not supposed to have an owner occupancy requirement, the cities say things like, oh, oops, the intern sent the wrong paperwork, which is very convenient. But like if you sign that paperwork, you're signing a deed restriction that follows that property even after your ownership. So be careful out there. AB 976 says no owner occupancy requirements for ADUs. I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Read the law. Go hire a lawyer. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about AB 1332 from Carrillo. So Assemblymember Carrillo passed this one. I'm less familiar with this bill, but it's really interesting. I think it's going to be a bit of a sleeper hit. What it does is it requires all cities and counties to have a pre-reviewed plan process. I don't love pre-reviewed plans. You might be wondering, why does Ryan like this bill so much? This bill has a very important line. That's what it's saying. What is a pre-reviewed plan? It includes, quote, a plan that is identical to a plan used in an application for a detached accessory dwelling unit approved by the local agency within the current triennial California Building Standards Code rulemaking cycle. What the heck does that mean? That means if you work with a builder or an architect or a modular ADU producer that often use the same standard plans or master plans, like they submit the same plan over and over within the same city, the second time that they submit that plan, and every time after that, it should go through a streamlined process. because technically it has already been reviewed by that city. This might seem like common sense, but actually I literally worked at an architecture firm that would use the same plans in the same city. And each time the city would come back with different comments and different requirements to change. And not like reasonable ones that it's like, well, it's a different slope, it's a different site, it's a different whatever. These were changes that should have been true about all the plans or none of the plans. But instead, you get different humans checking the plans, and local staff is just human. So some people catch one thing, other people catch another thing. And that's kind of wacky. But you go through the same process over and over, even though you're submitting the same plans to the same city, and it can take 90 days plus. So this law is basically saying, hey, once a plan has been submitted and reviewed within a 3-year cycle, which is how often they update the building code, then you've already reviewed it. That was your chance. And so this should be really interesting. This could lead to a lot of streamlining where we didn't have it before, especially for ADU vendors who are regularly using the same plans. I kind of compare it to master plans for like pools or other things where it's the same kind of thing being submitted over and over just on different lots. Yes, there are still things that need to change lot to lot, but there are also things that should be streamlined. And so hopefully this bill allows for that. The next bill we're going to talk about is AB 434 by Assemblymember Grayson. This one, if I'm honest, is the one that I understand the least because I don't understand the technocracy and the bureaucracy of California. But let me try to boil it down. The state has an HCD, Housing and Community Development Agency. That's like the state version of HUD, right? And they oversee a lot of different things. And the state has different laws about what the HCD should do. And then it has policies about what the HCD should do. Some things are really clear, like when a city adopts a new ADU ordinance, they're supposed to submit it to HCD, and HCD has a certain amount of days to say, hey, this is compliant or non-compliant, and here's our feedback. Similarly, they have all these processes about housing elements and other housing issues in the state of California. But then there are a lot of processes that aren't as explicit or clear. So, for example, there's a rule that says local agencies have 60 days to reply to an ADU permit application. It doesn't say who's supposed to enforce that 60 days or who's supposed to develop a process to allow overworked city staff to respond within 60 days, right? AB 434 enumerates a bunch of different things that are officially now the HCD's job, and it asks for some money. Oh, and here's a pro tip. If you want to read these laws, sometimes it's really hard to understand the legal language of the legislature, but at that website that I linked to in the description below the video, you can click on the tabs. There's one for like a legislative summary, and that's written in more plain English, so it helps you understand these things. Anyway, here's a partial list enumerated, and you can kind of see the level of detail it goes into for things that are now officially on the HCD's plate, in their remit, in their jurisdiction. So when they're fighting about what they have a say in, they can point to this law and say, hey, this is our turf. You got to listen to us on this one, or else it might get referred to the AG, or something might happen to you. All in all, I'll keep watching this. I'll report on how I see it developing with my clients and people I work with. And if you use the HCD form to submit questions about ADUs, this might be really interesting. They might have a lot more that they can do now than they could before this law passed. So that's AB 434. Last but certainly not least, AB 1033 from Assemblymember Ting, condos, baby. I'm going to let Assemblymember Ting explain this one himself.
Here's this really radical idea. The radical idea was, wow, if you build an ADU, we're going to give you the opportunity to sell it. That now is going to become the law here in California.
I'm glad I got to be there to do a victory lap with him. Having said that, this law is complicated. I'm going to try my best to boil it down here. This law allows cities to allow homeowners to sell their ADUs separately. What does that mean? All right, there have already been limited ways that you can sell ADUs separately from the primary home. For example, nonprofits in certain very restrictive settings Habitat for Humanity could sell an ADU separately from the main house. But cities want to open that up. They want to open that opportunity up to a lot more situations. And so the state is saying, hey, here is a law that says you can allow people to sell ADUs separately and follow in the footsteps of other regions that have done this, like Portland and parts of Texas, where there are lots of ADU condos going on, and it's really leading to a boom in the ADU market. Whether you plan on selling your ADU or not, this is a very important law, because even if you're holding your ADU, the fact that other people are condoizing and selling their ADUs could affect the value of your ADU. And if your value changes, how you leverage that might change too, and it could lead to different economic opportunities for you. So it's very important to pay attention to this rule, whether you're selling or not. Now, with all this ADU condo stuff, I got to admit, I'm in way over my head. I'm learning, and I'm teaching you as I learn. So I can make mistakes. Also, I'll predict things that don't turn out to be exactly the way they are. We're in this together. We're going to learn over the course of 2024. And as such, I've got a link in the video description below. If you're actually considering doing one of these condoizations, you need to talk to a real lawyer about your specific situation to be fully informed. If you're before that stage and you want to know how to ask your city, hey, can we do separate conveyance in our town? Or if you are on the city staff and you want to know, hey, how do we actually do this? How do we implement it? Or if you're you're a property owner, but you're not quite ready to talk to a lawyer, or you need to find a lawyer, I'm going to put resources in the video description below where you can follow along. And over the course of the year, as lobbyists share more boilerplates and templates and resources with me, I'm going to put those in the course. I'm going to disseminate them for free so that you can get access to that. And we can get more cities to adopt pro-separate conveyance policy. We're going to help city staff use boilerplates that the lobbyists and lawyers have developed instead of reinventing the wheel each time. And then we're going to hook you up with the resources you need to be able to tackle one of these projects on your own. And I cannot wait. Let's build some housing. Now, having said all that, let's talk a little bit about what this might actually look like in practice. I want to introduce two concepts: plat mapping and tiny HOAs. Plat mapping, or condo mapping, is a process that you go through to condominiumize a property. This is different than a lot split, right? So in a traditional lot split, or in an SB9 lot split, a land surveyor comes in and draws, and actually you're submitting a split. So you're turning one property into two properties. In a condo map or a plat map, the way I understand it, you're saying it's still one property, one piece of land, but the structures on it each have their own number at the assessor's office at the county. And so we can sell the structures separately. And then your lawyer, a real lawyer, is going to draw up documents for your cc&r or your tiny HOA. And that document will say specifically what rules govern these multiple condos on one property. So it's like a condo in a ton of different ways, right? And people tend to flip out at this point and ask me a lot of really good questions. I have questions too. The typical answer I get when I'm asking is that the cc&r, the sort of tiny HOA you set up to govern this property, that's going to answer the majority of the detail-oriented questions people have. And the surrounding law around cc&rs is going to answer the rest of those questions. That's why they got to be written up by real lawyers. You want to cover your tuchus. Questions like, hey, do you own the walls of the unit, or do you just own what's inside the walls? How do you access your property? Do you have rights to the driveway? What if somebody's blocking it? Where do you bring the trash on Tuesdays, right? Is there an easement for utilities work? What are you allowed to do? Upgrades, modifications? Can you rent the condo ADU out once you own it? Can you sell it freely to other people, or are there rules around it? There's a million good questions, and literally you guys have asked dozens and dozens of good questions. So I got an expert who's been lobbying for this legislation for a year now to come on and do a deep dive interview where we go into all the details. You can watch that here. Thank you for following these rules as they progress over the year. I think we're going to build a lot of housing in 2024. It feels like a hot one. Thank you. Thank you. Let's build some housing.